Hi, this is Katie Arwood from the MCC Library on behalf of MCC Reads, and I'm pleased to be introducing Dr. Stacy Young, who is our president here on the MCC campus. And Stacy will be talking today about her thoughts on reading with Patrick and sharing her perspective as an educator in administration.
So what did I learn from reading with Patrick? Well, first of all, I was just surprised at how much thinking I had to do while I was reading it. I found myself thinking about the book even during times that I didn't expect to. It made me question a lot of things I believed, but some things are still true. For example, that education does change lives. This book pointed out to me more than ever before that relationships really matter in education, meaning that the relationships that students and faculty and teachers make together and establish will help change that student's life. It's not just about what they're learning in the classroom, but those relationships about what else is happening in the students' lives really matter. The other big area that I found myself really struggling with and thinking a lot about was what happens when young people go to prison. And that is something that's always bothered me because people who are young, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, especially boys, the part of their brain that needs to be developed to fully understand the consequences of their actions isn't fully developed until they're in their mid to late 20s. And yet we're putting them in prison. So I struggled a lot with that while reading this book because it does touch on some of those matters and what happens when they get out of prison. You know, how do they become good members of society, especially with what they've learned in prison? If we can educate them while they're in prison, I think it's really important. And the government is actually stepping in with Second Chance Pell to help with some of this. And it's just funny that I was reading this book during a time that this is actually happening in our history right now. So those are some of the things that I was struck by while reading, that relationships matter, mentoring students matters, and also what's happening with our students who go to prison. So those are some of the hot buttons that really stuck with me as I was reading this book. So some of the benefits to me of being at a rural community college or in a rural setting is that we have the opportunity to get to know our students at a different level, get to know their families, understand what's happening in their lives. You know, oftentimes transportation is a problem for students in a rural setting because we don't have mass transit or subways to get students to our classes. But I think what's happened is, especially in the new era that we are in, technology's helping, although with the lack of internet access in some of our area, that's still kind of a challenge for us, but we are working on those things. I am a big believer that a small college in a rural setting is actually an opportunity. Students have opportunities to get a lot more involved on campus than they would at a larger school. Because we are a smaller community, you can become, you get to know people on campus and build those relationships. And those relationships, as I've mentioned, really matter in helping with student retention and engagement. So I personally think being at a small rural campus is a big opportunity for students. Whether it's those small class sizes, getting to know the faculty, having them get to know you, will help a student in the long run because they will be more successful because people truly care and will probably reach out and ask, why aren't you in class today? What's going on in your life? And because it's a small community, we also have access to resources that could help those students. So to me, the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages, and I'm so thankful myself to be at a small school. It's something I've always dreamed about so that I can be part of the community, get to know the students, get to know the faculty and staff. I also believe that education is the true equalizer, and I was constantly reminded about that while I was reading this book. That even though Patrick had a lot of setbacks, education ended up being the ticket for him, as it is for many students. But I also realized while reading this book that we absolutely must wrap other resources around students. Because if you're hungry, going to class, that's not going to work. If you can't get to class because of car transportation issues, that's not going to work. If you don't have the textbooks you need for class, that's not going to work. So it was very timely for me to read this book because we're looking at a concierge service for our students here at MCC. And that's what it's all about, making sure that students not just have their classes, but they have all those other resources that they might need in order to be successful. So I'm so thankful that Katie Arwood encouraged me to read this book. It made me think a lot more about things that I wasn't sure I was ready to think about, but it also pushed me to be better for our students here at MCC. So thanks, Katie, and thank you for listening.